How does the list of story dynamics compare to the lists of genres from Truby and StoryGrid? How do these match up? Where are they different? If you're familiar with Shawn Coyne's and or John Truby's lists, or if you're just curious, this video is for you. And if you stick around to the end, I'll talk about mashups. Welcome to Pro Tips for Story Dynamics. I'm Jule Kucera, creator and founder of StoryJoules, and this way of looking at story dynamics. I help writers craft powerful stories. These pro tips are not included in the Story Dynamics Quick Guide. You can download that in the description. Usually I save these for participants in my programs, but for you, I'm sharing. Because when I'm learning something, if I find models or lists that don't align, I have this need to either make them agree or understand why they're different. Today, we're working with 3 lists. Shawn Coyne's list of what he calls content genres from the StoryGrid, John Truby's list of what he calls genres from the Anatomy of Genres, and my list of what I call story dynamics. And I didn't pick a different word because I'm trying to be difficult. It's because every time I talk about genres on a webinar, people are confused. And so that is why I decided we need a different word. We can't use one word so many different ways. So that's why story dynamics. They represent how they function in a story. Both of these books are excellent, and I recommend them, especially the level of detail they have. With Story Dynamics Quick Guide, it's more of it's a way of understanding the underlying structure or logic behind the different dynamics, and I like that. Let's begin. As a reminder, it's not about the classification system. It's about how you use the dynamics in your story from beginning all the way through to the end. Because if you don't, people will get bored. All right, first we'll take the StoryGrid content genres from Shawn Coyne. And I'll just go through this a row at a time. StoryGrid has action, same. Crime, same. Horror, same. Love, same. Performance. I see performance as a combination of the action, external story dynamic, and the internal validation story dynamic. Society, same. Thriller's the same, and it's a combination. It's action plus crime plus horror. War, same. Western. I see Western as an external crime plus society in a particular setting, and the setting is where there is not the rule of law. StoryGrid also has morality, same, but I've renamed it redemption because I feel like that better describes what it's about. And then again with status, it's the same story dynamic, content genre, but I've called it validation because it's about where does a person get their validation from. Worldview, same, and then I have love as an internal story dynamic. In the StoryGrid book, Shawn Coyne does not, but I believe he's more recently talked about how love does function internally and externally. For John Truby, he's got 14, and I don't have them in any order other than alphabetical. Action, same. Comedy, not in story dynamics. Coming of age, same, but I'm calling it worldview because it's not just about becoming a certain age. It's about how your view of the world changes as you mature. Whether you're maturing at 17 or 25 or 45 or 75. Crime, same. Detective, I see the detective story as the external dynamic of crime plus the internal dynamic of validation, because that detective is operating on that validation scale. For fantasy, no. Gangster, I see that as action plus crime plus an internal dynamic, which could be validation or could be redemption. Truby's next 7, horror, same. Love, same. Memoir, to me, memoir is not a genre, not this kind of genre. It's a genre in a bookstore and the Amazon list, but the story dynamic depends on what is the internal dynamic of that memoir. How is that memoir is changing over the course of the story. Myth, none. Science fiction, none. Thriller. Thriller's the same, and it's a combination. It's action plus crime plus horror. And thrillers will flex across that spectrum. Some will be more action-focused, some more crime-focused, some more horror-focused. You've got to know your primary genre For example, I'd say Silence of the Lamb is a thriller with horror as primary. And then Western, I call that frontier, actually, if I had a name for it, because it doesn't have to be in the West. It could be out in outer space. It's crime externally, society externally, in a setting without the rule of law. This is the story dynamics diagnostic that's in the quick guide. These are the two that are not reflected in either Truby's or Coyne's lists. So there is not a community religion genre, and there is not a community love genre. And I hope it's not because I made it. It might be, though. I really like this way of looking at story dynamics. You have the external dynamics for an individual, you have the external dynamics for a community, and you have the internal dynamics for an individual. I like the underlying logic of this. I believe it's due to an alignment with a broader principle, which I won't share here because people have two very distinct reactions to it. They love it or they hate it. But if you're curious, it is on the last 2 pages of the Story Dynamics Quick Guide, which also includes the chart we just looked at. Wait a minute. What about mashups? What about Story Dynamics mashups? Here's what I have to say. Mash away and know your primary internal and your primary external story dynamics, because your reader is going to have an expectation. If they start reading something that seems to be crime, they want to see that crime paid off. I don't know if you've ever had the experience. I have. Some people find this a pleasant surprise. I do not. If I'm reading a crime story and it's a detective, I'm expecting that murder to be resolved. I'm not expecting it to turn into a love story and the murder just disappear, which is what happened with one story I read. Oh well, I encourage you not to do that unless you're going to be experimental, and then go be experimental. That's it for our detailed look of story dynamics. As you've been thinking or working with this and have questions, please use the comments so I can respond. If you've got a question, the odds are good that somebody else does too. Thank you for being here. See you next time when we dive into a StoryJoules analysis of one of Dr. Seuss's most popular books, Horton Hears a Who. Tally-ho.